Hello everyone and welcome to this TT Setup webinar. I'm Michael Riley with the Training and UX team here in Singapore. Today we'll be covering the setup portion of the TT platform. The TT platform setup application serves as the central location for managing all TT users, their accounts, risk, exchange connections, and more. The target audience today is certainly administrators, as most of the changes would need to be made by administrators, but non-admins or traders, are also certainly welcome, and as they have access to the setup portion of the platform, and they can still go in and see what their settings are on their own without the administrator present. So as we begin, we'll be clarifying some terms that we use in TT and then walking through the major pieces of the platform that are needed to be configured by an admin so that a user can log in and eventually place a trade. Primary components that we'll be discussing today are going to be the TTID, users, accounts, and connections. And I would say about 95% of that will be on the users and accounts, as that's where most of the configuration is done. We'll also discuss user share and account share. These aspects allow a user that belongs to a firm, or as we would say in TT, belongs to a company, to gain access to their account, which might belong to or be administered by another company, for example, their broker. I would also note that we are not covering everything in setup on this webinar, or even everything necessarily on users and accounts. What we're really looking to focus on is what an admin would need to focus on if they were to create that new user and get them up and trading. We are going to have a second webinar which will cover additional aspects of setup as well. However, I would like to take a moment here and just point out that if you go to our website, we do have extensive documentation on all aspects of the platform, but most notably setup. So in this case, tradingtechnologies.com is our website, and that will bring you to a page that looks similar to this. And across the top, we have trading, infrastructure data, markets, and resources. Under resources, we have the documentation section, which will bring you to a page that looks like this. You can certainly search by a specific term. And as we scroll down a little bit, we have a trade section, ADL setup, and we can select view documentation for setup. And from here, we'll see a long list of, well, a number of categories and then corresponding lists of topics within the setup portion of the platform, which we have obviously more documentation on. Now, in this case, again, we'll be talking about connections, accounts, users, and companies to a degree. But as you scroll down, you'll see, there's documentation for specific exchanges based on region and so forth. All right. So good resource to keep in mind if you ever have a quick question and want to see some of the docs. Let's jump in here. As I mentioned, we do want to clarify a couple of terms that we use, and we'll be using these throughout the webinars. So from here, we're talking about companies specifically in TT. So on the diagram here, we have the TT platform overall, and then we have smaller circles here representing individual companies. So we have individual brokers, we have prop firms, individual traders, and each one of these belong to a specific company. Now, a company is really just a group of users, accounts, connections that are all grouped together within a company, and then has a administrator that can then go in and reconfigure or create users and accounts that belong to that particular company. Now, an administrator in one company cannot necessarily create a user in another company, but there is somewhat of an overlap in how a user can exist in another one, which we'll get into, and that would be user share and account share and so forth. For now, when we say company, we very much mean a specific grouping of users and accounts or connections. And again, we'll show how they can be crossed over from one to the other. The key components, again, we'll be talking about users and accounts primarily here, but we will mention the TTID. The TTID is really what you log in with, so it's an email address, it's a password, and that is what connects you to your user, which is administered by your administrator, and then the user connects to an account, which represents money somewhere, and then on that account are connections, which will allow an order that is placed by the user on a particular account to then go to a specific exchange via that connection, which is typically a IP address and a port number, and allows that message to go to the proper place. So again, company, group of users, group of accounts, managed by an admin, TTID, kind of the keys to the platform, created by the user, by the trader. And that's basically the email address and password. Users represents the individual. The account represents the money in an account somewhere. And the connection is what actually lets that message, traverse a path in a network to get to the exchange. Okay, so If you were to navigate to the setup portion of the platform, you would go to trade.tt, which brings you to a page that looks similar to this. And on the right side, we've got login, where you would enter your email address and password, and then you would click sign in. And that would probably take you to a workspace launch page that looks somewhat similar to this, probably with fewer workspaces on the screen. But at the top, we have Trade ADL Backtest Monitor and Setup. And if you selected Setup, that would take you to a window that looks like this, which is the setup application within the TT platform. Now, in this case, just a few points about the layout here. I'm currently looking at the users. We've got a number of options running down the left side. So users, accounts, connections, those are what we'll be primarily focused on today. And as I select, a different option here, let's say accounts or connections, we will still have certain data populate in the window to the right. So we'll have a list up at the top here. And then as we select the specific users, for example, we'll have new data to populate down below based on that user that we are clicking on. If I then click on other tabs within the particular user's information, that will then reconfigure that information based on whichever tab and user I am selecting. So down the left, users, accounts, connections. Again, we're not going to cover every aspect. This would be a rather long webinar if we did. However, there's a number of additional drop-downs. If there are any questions specific to those, feel free to shoot us an email or have a look through the documentation. Okay, so just a few other things to note here about what it is that we're looking at here. I did mention we do have a list of users here that's in this case, just these 3 users. I do have this filtered down just for my users. So there is a drop down at the top of, or on the side of the headers in some of these columns. So we can then filter down based on, certain criteria that we want to set there. And also as we scroll to the right, we can see some of the details that will be set down below, but we'll see that in a horizontal fashion as well. So I've got the username, got the company, the invitation status, admin, trade mode, and this scrolls all the way out, and we can see, last updated date, created by who, and so forth. Let's go ahead and begin by creating a user. So if we look at the top left here, we've got a blue button for new user, and we can go ahead and click on that button, and that's going to bring up this window that is going to ask whether or not this new user is an employee of Trading Technologies. Now, it's saying Trading Technologies, but that's specifically the name of the company that we are in. So you'll note that as I look at my user, I am in the company Trading Technologies. If I was working at ABC Corporation, and in that ABC Corporation company, it would say so in that company field. So when I click on new user, it either is another employee, or if in a sense it's a client, I could say no, and that would kind of create it in a sub account or in a sub company within setup here. So I'm going to go ahead and click yes. It is another user, another coworker of mine, so I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. And that will bring up our new user page. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and enter in my information. And then from here, okay, so we'll get that basic information in, name, email address, contact, and so forth. On the right side, I'm going to set a trade mode to TT Pro. Generally, we have a few different trade modes that are available to us here. Generally, most users are going to be either standard or TT Pro. TT Pro will have, as you can see here, kind of in the light gray, the TT Pro is going to allow you access to Auto Spreader, ADL, Auto Trader, Rule Builder, Algo Dashboard, and Aggregator. So it's really the full package of all the aspects of our platform. There are different charges, and your sales rep would be able to speak to those charges. In this case, I'm going to go with TT Pro, and then as we go down, we have an advanced settings section, which is going to be a number of other aspects that we can set for our user. So if we need the advanced options package, which would give some additional options information, notably some Greeks for our options, we can check that box. Quick strike access for the quick strike feature. And then we have a number of other items here. So backtesting KRM22, if we're going to be writing to the API and we need to generate keys to that API, we would check that box as well, and so forth. As we scroll down, there's a few other fields we're not quite going to get into at this point. So let's go ahead and create this user. I'm actually going to modify this username real quick, and we're going to go ahead and click create. And this is going to generate that user line item in our users window here. So again, I'm going to filter this down real quick. Okay, So now I've got my 4 users here. The latest one is going to be Web4 here down at the bottom. And as we go across here, we can see the invitation status is not sent and the user access level is just user, whereas my current user that I'm logged in with is a full admin. So let's actually go through some of the settings that we see down below in our subtabs. So the settings tab looks very similar to what we were just looking at. We have the basic information, name, email address, contact information. And on the right side, we've got the status where we can see our trade mode, set to TT Pro, number of our advanced settings as well. However, it's worth noting that at the top here, we have the invitation status is not sent. Now, if you remember the diagram that I mentioned a moment ago, we're currently looking at the user, but we have kind of skipped over the TTID in a sense. So in this case, we have created this user as the admin for this user, and we would then click on Send Invitation. And this will send an email to the user, in this case to the email address that we have entered, and they would then be prompted to accept the invitation, which would take them back to this login page that looks like this. Now, as that user is new to the platform and they are unaware, in a sense, of what has been created, they would go with the new user selection on the left side here, and they would enter in their email address. And when they attempt to create the account, what they're really doing, even though we're somewhat being a little fast with the actual terms here, is that they would then enter their first, last name, obviously their email address is already here, and they would create a password. Now, when they are going through this process, they are actually creating that TTID, which is what they will be logging in with as they go into the future. So they would still use that email address, and they would be using that password to log in, and that would actually be connecting them to this user that we have just created. Okay? So once we send that invitation, you could click send here. So the invitation status has now been delivered. Once it is accepted, it would then look the same way that it does on my current user, which would then say invitation status accepted. It would have my name, my email address that I log in with, and my last login information. If we were to go back to our new user here, if in this case the administrator is in a company, let's say at a prop firm, and you have a broker that manages all of your accounts, and you wanted to share this user over to their to that brokerage so that they could attach the account to your user. We call that user share, and in order to do so, first you would have to have that relationship established on the back end, which is just an email that a request that can be sent over to any of your reps at TT, and they should direct it to the proper person. And then once that has, once you have created the new user, down at the bottom, we have a section for company relationships. And from here, we can click add, and we can then select the particular company or brokers that we want this user to be connected to so that we can have our accounts connected to the user, and then the user can then trade. Okay, so I can select these two companies, I can click select and hit save changes. And as I do so, if I talk to TT Company A or TT Singapore, I can say, I have shared these users over to you, and that would make this user line item appear on their setup interface as well, at which point they can go in, look at this user, and make some selective administrative changes, most notably connecting the account that they administer to this particular user. So continuing through some of the tabs here, we do want to, again, we want to move through and focus on certain tabs more than others. But I would say that if we go over to the permissions tab, a couple points really to observe here. One is going to be the admin permissions. This will always default to none out of an abundance of precaution. So that will default to none. If we need to make this particular user a full admin, we can simply change that radial dial to admin and then save those changes. Scrolling a little bit further down here, there are a few other settings, most notably trade permissions. If this user will be trading, they will need to have that checkbox unchecked so that they can trade when they have their accounts attached. There are some additional algo permissions, TT score permissions, and KRM22 permissions. If any of those features are coming into play, certainly those boxes would need to be checked as well. Now on the accounts tab, in this case, we are very specifically looking at the relationship between this particular user and the accounts that they have access to. All right, so in this case, if we scroll down just a little bit here, we have kind of a blank window, which is indicating that we have no accounts attached to this user, so they currently cannot, place any orders because they have no accounts. So we were just talking about this before, how the user can be shared out to a broker or whoever is managing their particular accounts. But in this case, we can act as that administrator, let's say receiving a shared user to our brokerage. And now if we want to provide this user with access to their accounts, we can simply go to the right side here to the Add button. This is going to pull up all of the accounts that I have access to. And I'm going to select this grouping of accounts, MRT group, and hit select. And that is going to add that particular account to this user. All right. So if I select this particular line, you'll notice that there's a number of order permissions that populate down below. And as I scroll down, it's a rather long list. However, I would point out that if we are just placing orders, there's only a few boxes that are extremely crucial, most notably delete orders, modify orders, and submit native orders. So as I check those three boxes, you'll note that the rest of the boxes will check automatically, which is great. And if there are any other features further up here that need to be enabled as well, you can certainly check those boxes as you see fit. All right, we'll go ahead and save those changes. I would point out here, not to confuse it here, but again, this is very much this is going to be a list of the accounts that have been associated with this user. When we get over to accounts, we'll be actually looking at this in the opposite direction. So we'll be looking at a users tab, and it will be the users that have been associated with an account. So currently, if I go over to the MRT account, I would actually see this particular user and the other users as well. In this case, I'm looking at the accounts associated with this user. So something to keep in mind, but we'll touch on that more in a little bit. As I go to the next tab, the Exchanges tab, I would want to preface this by saying there are certain features that are required by certain exchanges, both on the user side and on the account side. So in this case, we are accessing those features or settings on a per exchange basis from this tab. All right, so in this case, I'm going to click the Select Exchange dropdown, and let's go with CME, for example. And as I pull up the CME, we're going to get additional sub-tabs that will appear. We're going to default to the Order Routing tab in this case. And from here, again, there are certain features that the exchange may accept. And we have then, obviously, we have the settings populated here. We can see that the order ID is required here. So I'm going to say MR1 as my order ID. And I could save that change. And also, there's another tab here for exchange settings as well. That's saved there. Okay. In this case, just a couple of checkboxes for professional or non-professional trader. And then on the far left, there is a subscriber market data tab as well. Now, we've got three tabs here for subscriber, SDK, fix and SDK. Subscriber market data is essentially, if the user is going to be logging into a workspace, pulling up market data, and then placing orders using that screen interface, that is going to be subscriber market data that they will be seeing on their screen. All right, so in this case, if I needed, let's say, CBOT, CME, NYMEX, and COMEX, I would change the radial dial from deny to allow, and I would set one market data session for each one of these channels. Okay. Now, the reason, well, first, a session is market data streaming to a single device, as in the workspace on my computer. Now, if I pull out my cell phone and I want to use the app and also see the market data on that on the cell phone at the same time, that is a second session of data. Now, you don't necessarily need two sessions in that case, because if you had one running and you attempt on another device, it will give you the option to terminate the existing session and continue with the new one. Just kind of a click yes or click no. And if you proceed, it will then make that switch automatically. The exchanges do charge on a per session basis, so that's why we don't just say 8 and carry on. So that is something to be conscious of. So we set allow, we set one session, save that change, and now the user has been enabled for that data. As I saved, you'll notice this little red dot has appeared here, and that is indicating that there is an agreement that needs to be agreed to. So as I click on it, that takes us over to the Agreements tab, and you'll notice that there is a CME Market Data Subscription Agreement that is currently outstanding. So if I click on that, I can scroll all the way down, and on some of them I can agree right from setup. However, the user, when they log into the workspace, the trader in this case, if they log in and the first time they try and pull up that market data, they will be prompted to agree to that market data agreement at that particular moment. Okay, so we've set that market data, we've set the operator ID. The next tab is going to be limits. In general, position limits are set on the account side. However, we will touch on this on users as well. The limits are just slightly different. So if I select the limits tab, we are going to have a checkbox here for apply limits. If I check that box, that is saying that every order that comes through for this user will have to pass the limits that are set up here in this empty window. So currently, if I were just to save the changes without populating this, no orders will go through because I haven't added the limit at this point. Okay. So in order to add the first limit, I'm going to click the Add button on the right side here. We're setting up for CME, so I'm going to select. I'm going to select the CME. I'm going to go with the crude oil contract here. CL, future, CL. I'm not going to specify a particular contract month, otherwise I would have to come in and modify this every month or every expiration. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add. That is going to add that line item for that particular limit for the CL contract. Okay. Now, as I scroll down, again, I've got this particular line populated here and selected, and then down below we see additional information has been populated. So in this case, I've got an outright section, so I would want to check trading allowed. Let's set a max order quantity of 100. And as I scroll down further, there is a spreads and strategies section, trading allowed. Check that box. Again, max order quantity 100, and I'm going to save that change. Now you'll notice that these are just max order quantity settings that I'm adding here. It is not the max quantity for an entire position. That will be on the account side, and that is, again, that's really where the focus is for most limits. Okay. Custom fields is going to be somewhat related to some billing issues and some additional setup. Not a whole lot to touch on there. Under agreements, we did touch on, well, we were taken to the subscription market data. Again, the users will agree to these market data subscriptions through the workspace. So we've already seen that. On the environments tab, this is going to grant, the admin is able to grant this user access to simulation or live. Same format in this case, simply an add button on the right side, and then you can add or remove the environments as you see fit. Fixed sessions, we're not going to add fixed sessions on this particular webinar, but when that time comes, perhaps in the next webinar, we'll touch on fixed sessions. Login history will give a history of the login for this particular user once they do so. IP address restrictions allows an admin to restrict where the user is going to be able to log in from. And then app keys, if the user needs to write to the API, for example, they can come to the app keys tab and generate the keys that they may need. So again, right side, clicking new, they can name the particular app key, select what kind of app key that they need, and then what their usage plan is going to be. And that would create that particular app key for them. Access lines, account information, and change logs. Again, some more advanced features here, but we do, for the sake of time, want to move over to the account side of things. So change logs would really have any changes made to this particular user if those changes need to be investigated. So with that, let's move over to the account side of things and start to tie the rest of this together. One other thing to note before we go over to accounts, which I probably should have covered earlier, we created this user using the new user, and then we went through a number of the tabs. If you are going to be creating a number of users and you know that they are going to be similar in nature, you can create one user, work through the settings that you may need, let's say market data or connecting a particular account. And then once you have actually created that one user, you're able to clone them as well. So in this case, I've created that mRiley Web4. I can then go to clone at the top. I can enter another email address, first name, last name. And let's say in this case, this would be Web5. I've got a number of checkboxes down the side here as to which features we want to be cloning over. I can then hit clone, and that's going to generate that new user for me, which should just take a second here. There we go. So we can see the 5th user. So that has now been created. I just need to then send that invitation. We can see that the trade mode has already been set. If I go over to accounts, we will also see that same account has already been attached. So if you know that you're going to be creating multiple users, you can really create one and then just clone that out. I would point out, permissions, the admin permissions do not clone over. You'll note that if we look at Web4, that access level was full admin, and now this is just a regular user. That's just out of abundance of precaution there. But again, that can save you quite a bit of time, and that feature is going to be available on accounts, as we'll see here in just a moment as well. Let's go over to accounts. On the left side, upper left corner, we're going from users to accounts, and now we'll see that our list now changes. We have a number of accounts that are visible to us, and the layout is the same in that as we select a particular account, the sub-tabs then, well, the tabs remain the same, but the contents down below those tabs will then realign based on which account we are selecting. So again, we'll start out, we'll go ahead and do a new account. Again, we do have that clone button, but we will go with a new account in this case. And in this case, we're going to create a 5th test account. So when we get the new account page, appears like this, we're going to need a account name or number and populate that up at the top. And then as we go down, a couple of fields worth noting here. One is going to be the parent field. If you are creating a new account, you can just have that as a standalone account and then connect your connections and eventually a user in some form. But in this case, just to add in this feature here, we're going to use the parent field here, and in the dropdown, we are going to set that as MRT, which is an existing account hierarchy that I have here, and then we'll work through and show what that will entail later on. A little bit further down, we do have an order cross prevention setting here. This will actually be applied in the parent account, and we will come back to that and kind of show how that impacts the user and what that setting does to those child accounts. A little bit further down, we do have disabled trading on new accounts, so we'll want to uncheck that before we go forward. And with that, let's go ahead and click Save, which is going to create that account for us. And in this case, we now see, let's just get this just right here. We see the parent account, MRT, then we see an indentation for test account 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and test 5 is the account that we just created a moment ago. And the indentation indicates that it is a child account of the MRT account. And if we look at, this line down here, we see account MR test 5 and parent MRT as well. Okay. Now, I did mention that order cross prevention. If I click on that parent account, in the parent-child account hierarchy setup, there's a number of features that will be inherited by the sub-accounts, risk being one of them, connections will be another, but order cross prevention will be one as well. So in the parent account on the settings tab, as I scroll down, I've got the order cross prevention. Currently it's set to not applied. However, I can set this to reject new, cancel resting after waiting for the ACK from the exchange, position transfer if resting order is the best bid or the offer, or order cross prevention not allowed. So reject new would just, so if the market is 5.6 and there is a bid at 5, reject new would not allow any sell orders to go in at that price of 5. Cancel resting, again, if you are bid at 5 and a sell order comes in at 5, that would cancel the order working the bid at 5 and then allow that new sell order to go in. Position transfer would pull the order from the exchange and match those orders and generate a fill. And then position transfer, if the resting order is only at the best bidder offer, again, the qualifier there being the best bidder offer, and then order cross prevention not allowed, would disable this and not allow it further down the hierarchy. So in this case, let's go ahead. We can just leave one of those on. We'll go with position transfer in this case, and we'll save that change. Again, we are in the parent account in this case. And if I now go to our newly created MR Test 5 account, you can scroll down and we will see that, in this case, order cross prevention has been set at that parent level. And we have red text here indicating rule is set at parent account. Therefore, it's grayed out here. I'm clicking and I can't modify that field. Moving on to the users tab, I mentioned before, when we were in the users and we were looking at a specific user, we were looking at the accounts associated with that particular user. In this case, we're looking at the same kind of thing, except somewhat in reverse, because now we are looking at the accounts and we're looking at which users are associated with this particular account. So in this case, I've got quite a few users that are already associated. And again, as I mentioned, things can be inherited from the parent account. And you'll note that the inherited column here is showing MRT. So this is the parent account that is also granting access to this account for these particular users. Okay. Now, if we go back to our users here, if I go back to the user that I log in with, I can go to accounts. And in this case, I've got a few accounts here that are populated. There is also a checkbox here, show all nested accounts. And if I click on that, we're actually going to see this whole hierarchy. So MR test 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 5 being the account we just created. And that's really where that inherited list is coming from. So this user was attached to that parent account, and then it inherited those 5 accounts as well. Again, these were all inherited. I could go further and I could add again from the right side here. Let's go with M. Riley and see if those were all inherited. Okay. So I could go through here and I could select another user. I could click select just so we know what this looks like. In this case, the specific user, this is not an inherited situation. This was originally attached here. And if I click on that, again, we'll see those same order permissions will appear. And I would need to, again, enable delete orders, modify orders, and submit native orders. Oops. And then all of those would automatically populate for me. Now, this is actually a good example. I'm adding this new user to this user account relationship. However, you'll notice that there is a red denied. Let me see if I just make this bigger real quick. You'll notice that it says denied with a little X next to it in red, next to pretty much every line that we have here. And that indicates that there is something else that is preventing this setting from actually being enabled. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save that change. And this is actually going to be on most of these. Let's just take a look here. Okay, so we see that denied message, and what that actually indicates, if you ever see that in this particular location between the users and accounts on the user account relationship, we are looking at the particular account, and it means that on this restrictions tab, so we're jumping over a number of tabs here, I know, but if we select that restrictions tab, what we're looking at here is going to be a list of pretty much the exact same restrictions or permissions for order types and orders on this particular account. All right, so it's important to note that on this users tab, this is looking specifically at the user account relationship, whereas on the restrictions tab, it's looking at the account setting itself. Okay, so if it's denied at the account, it doesn't really matter what it is set on the user account relationship because the account is saying that it is restricted. So in this case, as we scroll down, we can see that the account restrictions, everything is set to deny in this case. So if we want to just allow them all, we can click allow all and save changes. And that will change the setting on the account itself, and it will allow all of those order types. It will grant the permission for the account to submit any of those order types on that account. Now that that has been done, if I go back to users in this case, I can go to that particular user, and as we scroll down, no more red denied message on those particular order types as we scroll down here. Next tab here is going to be limits. Again, going back to our hierarchy, it is worth noting that any limit that is placed at the parent order does trickle down to the sub-accounts. So if the parent account has a limit of 100 contracts, then the total amount that all of these sub-accounts could build is 100 lots. Okay. Now, if there were the need to further restrict a specific account, let's say we had a one-to-one relationship. So test one account goes to one user, test two account goes to a second user, a third and a fourth and a fifth, and so on. If we wanted to further regulate the positions of each one of those accounts, because we have that one-to-one relationship, we could select that particular account. We can go to limits. Again, we have apply limits checked here, which means that we must populate something in our window here. And we could then, again, add. We'll go with CME again. So we'll go with CL, future CL. Again, we won't select a specific expiration. We'll go ahead and hit add. And now again, the details are down below here. And again, it is much more extensive than it is on the user side. So at the top, we're going to have the general section where we'll see a max position family and a max position product. And from here, we could say, again, we're restricting a single user. So it might be considerably less than 100 contracts, which is what we could have at the parent. So let's say 10 will be the max position that we will give for the family or for the position on the product. So we'll set a 10 limit there. We'll scroll down. Again, we will have an outrights and a spread section. So for outrights, we will set trading allowed. Again, we already set the max order quantity on the user side, but we can do it on the account side as well. So we'll just set it to 10 in this case. We'll scroll down to spreads and strategies. Again, trading allowed, 10 lot again, and then we'll go ahead and save that change. So the major takeaway here is really if you're looking to set the, oops, let's pull that back up. If you're looking to set the max position for the product, that is set on the account level. Again, the account represents money, so it kind of ties together. If you need to get more in depth, let's say a trader is trading an entire curve and there is the need to get very specific as to how many contracts they can allocate to a certain part of the curve on a per contract basis. That can all be set here. So we do have, it does get considerably deeper. So max long position per contract or max long position gross. We can work with you to exactly fine tune what positions and how that allocation can kind of be controlled. But for the most part, the max position per product and the max position family is where the limits are going to be placed. Next tab here is going to be the SOD credit tab. SOD is start of day record. And in this case, at the top, we have a checkbox for create start of day records. So with this checkbox checked, at the end of the trading session for each exchange, a snapshot will be taken on a per account, per exchange basis. And that snapshot will take a snapshot of all the positions on a per instrument basis. And then on the front end, the user's buy quantity and sell quantity for the session will go to 0. The net position on the start of the new session, the net position will become the start of day. The net position would remain. And then it would basically kind of be the reset going from one session to the next. P&L would be cleared out, marked to settle, and then the new trading session would begin. So basically, we're tracking the positions from one session to the next. If you do not want that feature and you just want the positions to clear out altogether, or if the trader wants them to be cleared out at the end of the session, simply uncheck and save the changes, and those positions will disappear at the end of the day. There are some additional credit settings further down here. So if we are using margin or if we are monitoring the positions and enablements by margin, the credit settings section here comes into play. So first we would check the credit checkbox at the top. The daily limit can also be thought of as the account balance. So if we can, if our balance is 100,000 USD, we can set that value. And then the rule down below, we have a number of options here. So we have apply P&L, we have apply margin limit, we have apply P&L and margin, and then we have some span limits that are on their way to production, but somewhat still in the works here. So if we were to set the apply P&L and margin, this means that as we start to trade, on the first trade, let's say the margin for a particular product is $10,000. In this case, if the user went and placed a 10 lot order, that order would go through because we have 100,000. So 100,000 divided by 10 at 10,000 per 10,000 in margin per contract, they would be able to place that order. Now, since this is apply P&L and margin, we would be taking into account the P&L as well. So if they placed an order and they lost $100, so their balance would now be $99,900. If they then went to place that 10 lot again, they would get a reject because they attempted to, well, they would have needed 100,000 USD, and because the rule is apply P&L and margin, they are now short, so they would only be able to place a 9 lot order. In the next webinar, we will be covering setting margin, uploading mass amounts of margin, mass amounts of account balances, and so forth. Obviously, if you're an admin and you have 100 accounts, you don't necessarily want to come in and add add the account balance for 100 accounts. There is a mass upload, file upload that we can do as well, and we'll be getting into that on that next webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and save that change. There we go. The next tab is going to be connections. In this case, we have, again, an inherited list of connections that we have already received. So as I select connections, we can see the exchange, the connection name really, and the account that it was inherited from. Layout and the modification of, or adding or removing is somewhat the same. So on the right side, we can click add, and we will see the list of connections that are available to us that we can then add to this particular account. After we finish up with accounts, we will be creating a connection. So we will we'll walk through that process here in just a few moments. Okay, the next tab is the exchanges tab. We had one of these on the user side as well. So if there are specific features required by the exchange, those can be found, on the account side of things. Those can be found on the account, on the exchanges, and then we can go in and select the particular exchange. Again, I'm going to select the CME in this case. And as we go down, we have 2 sub-tabs for exchange properties and counterparties. And as we tick down a little bit here, we're going to have a number of fields that are available to us. There's quite a few, actually. And then we have a number of free-form fields as well. In this case, we are inheriting, again, some of the values. So value is set in parent account, member trader, customer, and so forth. If you need any assistance with these values, or you need clarification, feel free to reach out to us. We do have an onboarding team that is very much on top of all the settings that go into these particular accounts. But I would say for the most part, this information does generally come with the exchange, so they would provide it to you, and then it can be added into TT as you may need to do so. Okay, the next tab is going to be fixed sessions. Again, we're not going to delve too much into fix on this particular webinar, but you will note very similar layout to everything else. So if you have a fixed session and you need to add this particular account, you can click add on the right side and then add that particular session that you may be interested in. We did mention the restrictions already. So we had everything in the deny column. We clicked allow all, and now we have allowed it. Again, these are the restrictions for the entire account, whereas on the users tab, that was the relationship between the account and the users. All right, on the account algo settings, we do have a couple of options here. So max number of cancels per instance and max number of updates per instance. That is related to the a couple of algo settings there. And then the last one is, well, 2 more here, but sharing tab in this case will allow an admin to share the account to another company. Okay, so this is kind of the brother to the user share. So when we're on users, we were looking at a particular user, and if we scrolled all the way down to the bottom, we had company relationships where we could then add a company and make this user available and visible to the admin in another company. All right, so that is on the user side. In this case, we're looking at the accounts, and we are looking at sharing this account over to the admin in another company. So same kind of layout of things, add button on the right side. We can then again, select whichever companies we want to make this available to. And if we click on select and save the changes, when those admins at those two companies log in and they go to their accounts, they would then see MR Test 5 and the company name Trading Technologies down below. They could then create sub-accounts and then connect those sub-accounts to their users and kind of manage that level of administration on their end, rather than the user share model where the users are shared to the broker, for example, and the broker then attaches the accounts to the relevant users. The last change here is change logs. So again, if there are any changes that are made here and you're not sure who made them or what was changed or whatever it might have been, those logs are available in case there is any investigative work that may need to be done. All right, so we do want to get on and have a look at connections as well. So in this case, if I go to connections, same kind of layout that we've seen before. We're going to have like a long list of all the connections that have been created or are available to us. The company section will determine, whether it was shared to us and we have it, we have received that connection or access to that connection by a user share or an account share setup. In this case, company is all going to be Trading Technologies as we're looking at it here. But let's say we need to create a new connection. So first we would receive our connection information from the exchange. And once we have received that, we would come in here to connections and using the new connections button in the top left, that will bring us to a screen that looks like this. And let's say CME webinar connection. All right. So under the exchanges, I'm then going to select the CME, and the CME in particular has a number of different types of connections that are available. They would specify in the information that they give you, or based on what you request. In this case, this is in simulation, so I'm just going to go with convenience gateway in this case. And as we scroll down a little bit, we're going to have some more detailed information regarding what this connection, where we're really connecting to. So for the primary IP, I'm going to enter in an IP address, again, that would come from the exchange, and a port number. And then the exchange would provide you with the session ID and firm ID, secret key, and all the information, again, that would come from the exchange. So once that information has been entered, I do need, even in SIM, we do need to have this populated so that a user can trade. So in SIM, we're just populating with kind of dummy information. And then once it has all been entered, we can go ahead and hit create. And now we can see our connection has been added to our list. So the status is currently down, which we can see in the settings tab here as well. So connection is not enabled. And what we need to do first, before we bring it up, is we need to add at least one account. So if I go to the accounts tab, we'll see a window here, no accounts present. And on the right side, I can click add as usual. And what I can do is MR test number 5. And I'm going to go ahead and hit select. That is going to add that account to my list, and I will save that change. All right, so we have added the account. In this case, we are adding that from the connection side. A moment ago, we looked at the accounts and we looked at the connections tab. Let's go right to it here. Before we were looking at the accounts, looking at the account and the connections tab, we could see the list of connections that were available. In this case, we are going from the connections. Bear with me here. CME webinar connection. It's down here, just too many. Okay, so in this case, from the connection side, we are looking at the accounts tab, and we can see the list of accounts. We have one attached. We can now go to the settings tab, check the box for connection enabled. You can save that change, and in about a moment, that down status will turn to up, and then that means that the connection is up and running, and we can then trade on that connection. Now it is worth noting, we do need all these pieces in place, even in simulation. Obviously, if I place an order in simulation, it's not going to go to the CME. However, if I'm going to place a CME order in sim, it will still need to, the connection will still need to be in place, and really, it still goes to the TT matching engine, or the simulation matching engine, and then matches those orders accordingly. But again, the pieces do need to be in place. On the accounts as well, I'm not sure if we touched on this, but I breezed over it on accounts, but in this case, we created the MR Test 5 account. If we wanted to just clone this account and we needed a sixth account after we've set everything up, we could do MR Test 6. Again, all the boxes are checked on the right side as far as the settings go. The parent will be the same, the MRT parent account. And I'm going to go ahead and hit clone, and this would copy for another account the MR Test 6 account, and I could, out of best practice, I could still tab through here and check the settings, make sure that the proper users have been attached, that the correct limits are in place. See that CME limit is in place, apply limits is checked, SODs should still be enabled. There we go. Now we certainly have a number of connections. I'm sure the one that I just added is present. There we go, CME webinar connection. And so on and so forth. So that is obviously going to be a big time saver if there's multiple accounts that need to be made. There we go. All right, looking good. Okay, so in that sense, we've basically walked through. If we go back to our key components here, we started out with the user. We created the user. We then created some accounts. After, when we created that user, we sent that invitation that would have gone to the user. They would have attempted that login. Creating that new user, entering their email address, entering their password, accepting that invitation, connecting them to that user that they have, that they were invited to join, and then they were able to access the platform and then use the accounts that we created and the connection, and then that order can get to the exchange. So as I mentioned, we are going to have another webinar. There's a lot of other aspects to the setup portion of the platform. Certainly, we mentioned margin and a few other points there along the way. So we'll be having a follow-up webinar getting into those finer details as well. If there are any questions regarding setup, regarding ADL, auto spreader, front end, new user training, whatever it might be, we do have our team distribution, so training-ux@tradingtechnologies.com. Feel free to shoot us an email with whatever the question is, or if you need to have a session on a particular topic, we can certainly get on a session and walk through whatever the issue might be and try and work it out with you. Thank you everyone for joining the webinar. I trust that it was beneficial. Obviously, like I said, send us any questions you may have and we'll be happy to answer them. Take care and have a good day.